everybody, and welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, True Aussie Murders Caffeinated. I'm your host, Belinda Brady, and welcome, guys. Welcome to episode 11. Yay, we've reached double digits and we've passed episode 10. So, this episode is titled Dumped in a Stump, the Murder of Chrissie Venn. Now, trigger warning straight off the bat for this one, guys. This episode, I will be talking about the murder and rape of a young girl, a young 13-year-old girl. If this upsets you, if you can't listen to this, that is okay. Turn me off. I will not mind, and I totally 150% get it. But if you are happy to listen to me and to listen to this episode, then please settle in, because not only is today's episode a murder mystery where we don't have a convicted killer, we also have a ghost who seemingly is looking for her killer from beyond the grave. Right up my alley, guys. So straight up, what am I drinking? I'm drinking my usual suspect black coffee with caramel syrup. Yes, I have gone back to caramel syrup, but this one's actually quite nice. It's very sweet. I'm a sweet gal. Don't let anyone tell you differently. And straight up, I will tell you my sources. My sources for this episode are trove.nla.gov.au. Reddit, yes, believe it or not, Reddit, I found some amazing facts about this murder, and www.devonport.net.au/the mysteries of Allison Road. Now, if you need to get yourself comfy, get yourself a drink, get whatever you need. You might need a cocktail, you might need, something a bit hard for this episode, then please go ahead, put me on pause and come back to me, because I will be here waiting. Okay, welcome back, guys. I hope you are settled. I hope you have a drink. I hope you are comfy or warm, or if you're like me in Australia at the moment where we are, it's summer. I love summer, but I forget how hot it can get where we are sweating. I hope you have a cool drink. Either way, lend me your ears, because today's story is a sad one with a bit of a spooky twist. Okay, so today's episode, we are in a town in Tasmania called North Motton, and the year is 1921. Now, for those of you who don't know Australia that well, Tasmania is a state of Australia, but it is separated from Australia, if that makes sense. So it's separated from the mainland. So it is a little island, but it is still part of Australia, which is a bigger island, if that makes sense. And it is meant to be beautiful. I have never been there. I hope to get there one day. It's meant to be amazingly haunted, and that is something that is on my bucket list to check out. But anyway, I digress, which I do. So today's episode, we travel to picturesque North Motton in Tasmania, and the town looks beautiful. If you do a little Google of it, it looks like a beautiful bushy, scenic area with really a population of not that many people. It is located about 28 kilometres or 17 miles west of Devonport, which is a major town of Tasmania. And as of 2021, census recorded a population of only 425 people for the town of North Motton. So I can imagine in 1921, where this crime took place, there would even be less people living there. Anyway, so the case evolves around young Chrissie Venn, who was a 13-year-old girl, and she was sent to run errands for her mother, which was not unusual in 1921, and it's not unusual now. But sadly for Chrissie, she ended up raped and murdered, her body stuffed in the stump of a tree. Now, as the case, people wanted it to be solved, and they wanted it solved quickly. And as was so common at the time, especially with a lack of any kind of DNA evidence, a man was tried, convicted, and then it was just as quickly as he was convicted for her murder, he was acquitted. So, murderer unknown. The only person who knows who killed Chrissie Venn is Chrissie herself and her murderer, and they are not around to tell the story. And as I said, in a spooky twist, Chrissie's ghost is said to have to haunt the spot where her body was found. Now, let's go to the very beginning. Let's go to the very beginning, because with every story there is always a beginning, and there's a bit of a different one for this story for young Chrissie. Now, Chrissie Claire Venn was born on the 25th of July 1907 to her mother, Eva May Chilcott Warden, who was born to parents Arthur and Mary on the 24th of June 1881, and was one of 6 children. Her dad, now Chrissie's dad, George Arthur Venn, I could not find any information on him apart from a few tidbits I found on Reddit. It was an absolute information black hole. But what I could find was apparently Chrissie's father, George, was said to be younger than her mother, Eva, which would have been quite the scandal at the time, around 6 years younger. Now, the couple supposedly married in 1901, though an exact date has never been confirmed, and I could not find an exact date. And Chrissie was born in 1907, and the son then went on to have, and then the couple went on to have a son in 1908, and then George just vanished. Eva claimed he drowned at sea, though it was claimed that he had been seen getting around town, getting around Tasmania in 1917. So whether or not he left Eva and his kids and she was told he drowned at sea, who knows? But anyway, Eva had remarried by 1913, so I'm pretty sure she didn't care if he was alive or dead, or, if he just took off. She'd already moved on. Because this marriage is a bit of a weird one too, because immediately after she married her second husband, Francis Henry Dawes, she left to live somewhere else. Reportedly, she moved back in with her parents, but her and her husband obviously still managed to see each other, at least physically, because they had a daughter in 1913, and by 1915, Eva was suing Frank for child support. Now, surely I'm not the only one at this point thinking this would make for great reality television. Like Chrissie's mother, Eva, there's drama, there's baby daddies, there's the whole works. It would, let's make it happen. Anyway, guys, I digress again. Now, according to some records, Eva was living at her former husband's cousin's place, a man by the name of James Venn, as early as 1914. Now, James was married to a woman called Edith Revel, and I'm not sure what she thought about this situation. I don't know if she approved of it or not, but apparently she went on to commit suicide in 1921 and would leave a note in a book that read, "Do go to Jim, he's in trouble, do what you can to comfort him, I must go." Now, it has to be said too that there were allegations around this time that young Chrissie, Eva's daughter, had been raped by a man unknown or a man unnamed. And, with all these men coming and going from Chrissie's life, it is not impossible. So I don't know if that note is alluding to anything like that. I mean, of course, Jim is another name for James. We don't know. Anyway, in 1919, Chrissie's mum, Eva, moved back in with her husband, had another child, but this child was not fathered by Francis. I know. At the time of Chrissie's death, they were living with a man called Llewellyn Ward. So I'm gonna have a guess here and say he possibly was the father of the other child, or the first husband, or the second. Look, I'm as confused as you are, but I'm going to go on and say that I guess that Eva was, might have been the talk of the town, because she certainly moved around a lot. Anyway, now the facts are, the non-confusing reality TV show style facts are: on or about 5 p.m. on Saturday the 26th of February 1921, Eva set her young 13-year-old daughter Chrissie on to run some errands. Now, Chrissie was out to buy some groceries, meat, and to go to the post office in North Motton. Now, she'd done this several times. This was normal for Chrissie. She had money, she had a basket, and she had cloth on her. Now, the trip usually took around 1 to 2 hours, and when Chrissie didn't return by 7 p.m., her mother set out looking for her. But she didn't go far, only down the road a few times to try and see her. I imagine she's probably gone down this dirt track and yelled out Chrissie a few times and then came back. And then she very quickly realised her daughter was not coming home. Panic set in, the police were called, and a search party quickly set out looking for Chrissie. But she was not found until nearly 5-6 days later, on the 1st of March, when the young girl Chrissie was discovered by a member of the search party. Her body had been stuffed headfirst into a charred tree stump in a part of Allison Road where her body was found, which was known as Dead Horse Gully, which was not far from where she had set off. Around her throat was a piece of hay baling wire, about a foot in length, that had been twisted tightly around her throat. A piece of the dress she had been wearing when she left her house, with a brooch still attached, had been stuffed down her throat, and this was believed to be her cause of death, suffocation. A small amount of money that her mother had given her was also missing. There was also signs of sexual assault, and court records indicate that young Chrissie had absolutely put up a fight for her life, with evidence of a struggle, as bruises on her body and in that area where her body was found in the tree stump, a quantity of blood-stained pubic hair, the same colour as Chrissie's, some safety pins, and bloody cotton was found. A bloody stick was also found as well. Now, I do need to say that the bloody cotton would have been used by Chrissie as a sanitary pad, because that is what girls used at the time. A gate close to the crime scene, a gate close to where Chrissie's body was found, was part of a property owned by a family called the Hearps family. Now, I hope I have said that right. It is spelled Hearps. And their property was only a 5-6 minute walk from Chrissie's home, and the fence around their property was the source of the wire found around Chrissie's throat, as it was clear that the fence had recently been cut. Now, it is worth mentioning that men who were ploughing in the paddock that day saw Chrissie pass by, and a few minutes later heard a scream. They dismissed it and kept on working. I wonder what would happen if those men stopped and went to check out the source of that scream. Would they have been able to help the young girl? If it was Chrissie who was screaming, who knows? Anyway, suspicion took hold of the small town, and the townsfolk were horrified by the brutal, unbelievable crime that had taken place, and they were scrambling. There was no suspects. There was no clear suspect in this case, but soon enough one would come out of the crowd, and his name was George William King. Now, George was a 36-year-old labourer, married, father of several kids. I could only find information on 3. Was well known to Chrissie's mum, and had spent several nights at her house, often leaving in the wee hours. Now, Chrissie herself had told somebody in town that she was afraid of George. She would cross the side of the road opposite his house to avoid him when she was out running errands for her mother. But the reasons for this are unknown, and it's also unknown if this was just town gossip or actual fact. But the fact is, George had joined the search party looking for Chrissie, and he had aroused suspicion when scratches on his hand had been spotted. Something he quickly dismissed as, I fell on a rock. That's how I got these scratches. And, you know, also digging through, you know, bush and scrub and leaves and sticks. I also scratched myself doing that, doing that. Now, with a lack of suspects and a completely botched police investigation, and I will go into that later, naturally, the finger was very quickly pointed at George, and he was arrested and charged with Chrissie's murder. An accusation and a charge which he adamantly denied. A trial for his murder case started on the 14th of August 1921. Now, the evidence was that George lived on the roadside in the vicinity where Chrissie was found, and he was working on a potato patch the day that she was murdered. He was seen leaving the patch at around 3:30 p.m. and heading home, and apparently he walked home through the bush. Now, he was not seen again until around about 8 p.m. that night. Now, it was said that he knew Chrissie would be running her errands around this time when he left, and he went to meet her. George also failed to give a satisfactory account of his movements from 3:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. His right hand and face were badly scratched, and it was put to George that these marks were made by human fingernails. It was said that George lied repeatedly when police questioned him, and he was said to be trying to set up an alibi, having asked people if they'd seen him around town or, you know, seen him around the time that the murder took place, I guess trying to plant false memories in people's minds. And yes, George did help search for Chrissie, and it was only when he held his hand up and the scratches on them were seen that people started to look at him. And witnesses were called to stand, at his trial, and they were asked if they had seen George out on his potato patch that day. They all said that they didn't. Now, Chrissie's mother, Eva, was called to the stand, and she was understandably distraught. And she was helped to the stand by a friend who comforted her and kept her going during what would have been a horrific ordeal for the mother. She stated her daughter was nearing 14, and it was normal for her to go to the store and run errands for her. She stated that when Chrissie didn't return home by 5 p.m., she began to worry and set out looking for her. Now, I don't know why they did this, but poor Eva was visibly distressed when asked if she wanted to be shown photos of her daughter's blood-stained clothing. And she responded to such an absurd question with, "Don't show them to me." So absurd, so ridiculous was that question that the judge actually stepped in and said, "What is the point of torturing the young mother with this?" And the defense let it go. Now, a man by the name of Charles Taylor, who helped with the search for Chrissie, was brought to the stand and stated that on the 1st of March, he was helping search for Chrissie when he went and looked at a tree stump between the Herbst property and Allison Road. He noticed that the charcoal at the bottom of the tree stump was crushed as if it had been disturbed, and that's when he discovered Chrissie's body. Police were called, and Constable Brown and Sergeant Tompkinson arrived shortly after the discovery and took on the investigation. Now, these police officers interviewed George's 2 children, a son and 2 daughters. But for some bizarre reason, they didn't ask about the scratches on their father's face, and nor did they mention it to the kids. And one of the scratches on George's hand was festering, making it hard to identify how or where he got it. George insisted that the wound in question happened when he fell on a rock. Something that, was backed up by the court saying it was probable that could have happened. Now, after a few days of deliberation and with no real smoking gun to be found, there was no smoking gun apart from George's injuries, which he explained away and seemed to have, I guess, medical backup with, reports saying, yes, he could have fell and hit himself on a rock, and that's how he got those cuts. I mean, no one saw how he did it, so there was no witness to it. But anyway, after a few days' deliberation, the jury found on the 20th of August, quote, that Chrissie Venn was willfully murdered at North Motton by some person or persons unknown, but we are of the opinion that the weight of evidence is sufficiently strong against the accused George William King, to warrant his committal for trial. George King had been found not guilty and was a free man. The lead detective was fired for his gross incompetence in handling the case from the moment Chrissie's body was found. He had failed to interview several suspects and focused solely on George, rather than look at several people and try and see if any of the pieces fit. And the coroner's once stellar reputation was in ruins because he had failed to collect and preserve key pieces of evidence and had changed his findings that many times that his testimony was rendered useless. A young girl had been murdered, brutally, horrifically, savagely murdered. She had been sexually assaulted. A mother had lost her daughter, and an innocent man, a seemingly innocent man, a father of daughters himself, had been accused, tried and acquitted of one of the most heinous crimes, and all for nothing. His reputation was in tatters. He was never going to recover from this. Chrissie's killer, however, walked among them and walked free, and he has never, ever been found. And he has taken his secret to the grave with him. And the only other person who knows his identity is Chrissie. And of course she's dead. And that leads me to the other part of this story, which is the supposed haunting by Chrissie of the stretch of road where she was murdered. Now, for years, stories of ghostly apparitions and strange happenings along Allison Road, where Chrissie's body was found, have made their way around town, made their way around Tasmania and into Australian ghost story legend. Those who travel down that lonely stretch of road have reported their otherwise normal working cars stalling, ghostly apparitions of a young girl disappearing into the darkness after she has run in front of their car, floating axes along the side of the road, being followed at night by strange lights behind them like a car is tailgating them, but there is no car there. Or, probably the spookiest of all, or the most unnerving, is picking up a young girl hitchhiker only for her to vanish minutes after getting in the car. Now, many think the hauntings or the events of this road, the spooky, ghostly events of this road, are Chrissie looking for her killer, or perhaps even a friend, some comfort. Who knows? But the spooky hauntings of Allison Road make for great stories and make for good folklore, and they are truly stamped in Tasmania's haunted history. And if you are inclined, please look into Tasmania's haunted history because it is insanely haunted. And if anything, it keeps a light on the horrific crime that occurred there and ensures Chrissie's memory is never forgotten, even if it is simply now, I guess, diminished down to a ghost story. The ghost in question was a young girl who had hopes and dreams and, a future ahead of her, and that was all taken away by someone who decided their wants and needs in that moment were more important than hers. And I, for one, I like the idea that she may be seeking revenge from the grave and looking for her killer and haunting that little area where she lost her life, because hell, if that happened to me, you can guarantee I would be haunting that place and I would be looking for the person who did this to me. So there we have it, guys. The horrible tale of a young girl who set out on a hot summer's day to run errands for her mother, only to be brutally raped and murdered and stuffed into the stump of a tree like a piece of rubbish, and her killer never have been brought to justice. Was their killer in front of them the whole time in the stand, being tried and acquitted for a murder that he did commit? We will never know. Unfortunately, we will never ever know what really happened on that horrible day to that young girl. But I do hope that she is resting in peace, and I do hope that her mother was able to find peace after having to live through such a horrific, brutal crime that happened to her young girl. Okay, guys, that's it. That's a wrap on episode 11 of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. Dumped in a Stump, the murder of Chrissie Venn. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and I thank you for listening. I appreciate every single one of you. And if you are enjoying these episodes, I would love it if you could spread the word. Tell everybody, tell people in the street, tell random strangers about it. Thank you for listening again, and stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I will catch you all